If we want to go for our dreams, we've got to go to that place. We've got to liberate that energy. The tools are very much a part of our culture right now. These psychedelic medicines, meditation, mindfulness, powerful breath work, breathing patterns of the Wim Hof method and Dr. Huberman's NSDR, moving our bodies, getting out in nature, all of it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Webdelics podcast, where we're on a journey to find out the truth about psychedelics and plant medicine, to get rid of the myths and to change the narrative. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and with us today is a high-energy guest that I have come to just think the world of, Matt Simpson. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Scott, for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm an empowerment coach and microdose mentor. Really excited to push the edges with you today.
I'm all about pushing boundaries, and I am ecstatic to have you on the show. So the theme of the episode today is how to turn your trauma into your superpower, particularly using psilocybin, magic mushrooms. Going back to the very, very first episode of this podcast, and this is something that's been repeated many times during the course of this series, what drove me to be so interested and invested in the subject matter of this podcast was my own history of trauma, particularly as a child. As I said in episode 1, my upbringing was very, very difficult. And I was diagnosed by 2 therapists that I saw as having post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that I went to counseling for 11 years to deal with. And when we had our pre-show, one of the things that I really felt connected with you about was I felt that you were someone that had been there, who understood. And I know a lot of folks who might be listening to or watching this may be feeling like there's this whole conspiracy of silence around trauma and the things that they've been through and that they're alone. And so I wanted to start this episode with acknowledging that, and to also ask you right up front, why does trauma matter to you? Why do you care?
Yeah, thank you, Scott, and thank you for your vulnerability, for being raw and real, and for going there. I look at all the madness that we see in our world is a projection of unhealed trauma. And this trauma, if we're going to get our human family back on track, we've got to get to the root. We've got to heal the trauma. I'm an adult survivor of childhood sexual trauma. I had a profound experience with psilocybin back in 2013 that catalyzed my journey, catalyzed this path that I'm on right now. And, it allowed me to get into my nervous system and to let go. And I'd been gripping so tightly, probably since my childhood, in this constant fight or flight state, this hyper arousal, cortisol drip, norepinephrine, adrenaline. And these medicines allowed me to calm down, to let go. And ultimately, I'm working now to pay forward the grace of plant medicine healing.
Whoa. Okay. Let's roll back a little bit. I want to talk to you about this reaction that you had to trauma. As I've mentioned on this show before, I would always tell people, if there were a zombie apocalypse tomorrow, you want me there, because I'll make sure that every zombie dies, that every human enemy is destroyed, and that we are feeling safe no matter what. And I will happily put my own life at risk to make sure that happens. And when it came to my personal life and my professional life, I acted that way. There was this extreme level of aggression that I would bring into the room that I've come to understand was a reaction to trauma. I developed this default state as like this hypervigilance, I think was a term that you used, to any threat, zombies or otherwise, and acted to stop before anything could start. Is that something you can relate to at all?
100%. Yeah. Again, I would imagine, I just put a post out today about how it was 4 or 5 days before my first ayahuasca experience, late in 2014. I was taking my intentions very seriously, taking some time to really settle in and get intentional. I'm flying out of the country to have this plant medicine in a ritual with people I don't know in a foreign country. And so again, bringing the intentionality into this. Why am I doing this? What am I seeking to accomplish? What's wrong with my life right now? What could change, etc. And in that moment, I remember being in the bathtub, in my bathtub in Chicago, doing some slow breathing, and I believe that was the first time in my life that I calmed down my nervous system. That I was in this constant gripping tightly fight or flight. And to feel that peace was grace, and to have the clarity from that peace. I had a visionary experience 4 or 5 days before I went to drink ayahuasca, and it was probably because, again, my constant state, my baseline normal was in this fight or flight constricted state. And these medicines can be very powerful in helping us reconnect to our breath. The more I do this work, the more I ponder, is it the psychedelics, or is it how they help us access breathing patterns that normally we don't have access to?
Wow. Okay. Before we even get down that road, and that I'm so glad you opened that little Pandora's box. We're going to make sure that we dive in really deep there. But let's talk about something else that you said right up front in the hour. I am the survivor of childhood sexual abuse. You are a male. That, to me, is something that is in the culture that I've lived in through most of my life, a radical and shocking thing to say. I will not claim to have been sexually abused. I was abused, but not that particular way. Saying that, declaring it to the world, was hard for me. How did you get to the point where you could recognize that was something that happened to you, let alone talk about it?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I was in my late 20s, maybe early 30s, and I was confronting the same broken relationships, the same drama in romantic relationships over and over. It was the Katy Perry's Love Bipolar. That was me. It would be 3 breakups, 3 very painful breakups, and then all right, Matt, this guy is this is crazy. And typically that was my pattern, and I had some behavior that I'd stooped to a point where I was really just not in touch with my values, and that motivated me to seek help and to reach out. And I was drinking a lot. I was popping pills. I had horrible anxiety, horrible depression. I was following all of our societal rules. And the more that I followed our societal rules of success, the sicker I became. So I got very, very curious. And I reached out for help and got the help that I needed, and then realized through working with a therapist that the next step was confronting my family. This was something, I was just tired of this narrative that my parents were this confabulation about a childhood that wasn't accurate with my experience. So I got them together. And the first time they had been together for 20 some years since they got divorced. And we had a real talk about the childhood sexual trauma that happened by a close family member. And this was our family's to carry, not mine to carry. And geez, that was a cathartic release to let that go and to not have to carry that alone. And the reason why I made this stand and I step up and I share about this is because 1 in 5 of us are subjected to this childhood sexual trauma in the early years of childhood development. And there's some very powerful energetic programs bullshit incorporated, the Catholic Church, that is, at root of this. As Sam Harris says, and I'm getting all fired up here. Sam Harris is a thought leader in this space, and he says if we had any Fortune 500 companies that habitually employed sexually confused men, we would run them out of town so fast. But with the church, we just turn a blind eye, and it's pervasive, and it's in our society, and I believe it's at the root of what ails our collective.
I can't even begin to imagine calling family members into a room with me and having that sort of conversation. To me, that's an act of almost unbelievable courage, or maybe if it had been me, it probably would have been desperation, or maybe some combination of them both. It sounds like that and the therapy began you on a road, but how and why did psilocybin enter your life?
That had started my truth-seeking journey. Having that confrontation with my past and the trauma, my family, etc. Psilocybin came into my field of awareness probably a few years later. I was out on a boat with my friend T, and let's call her Mary. We're out having a good old time, and it felt safe for me to take psilocybin. T was a very established businessman at the business club that I was a member of, and it felt safe. I was around in my 20s. I was around MDMA and psilocybin, but I was so hard charging with working and focus and goals and paying bills and building, being on a career path, a trajectory, again, following all the rules. Mm-hmm. But at this time in my early 30s, I did feel safe taking that handful of mushrooms. We're out on the boat on Lake Michigan. It's a holiday, and we're drinking beer, and I'm with my dear friends and having a good time. And it was a profound mystical experience. The best way that I can describe it was I had an extension cord coming out of my hip, and it was plugged right into the universe. And I could feel, for the first time, I could feel so much, and it was just a profound experience. And I always joke that my friend T took the same amount of psilocybin, and he was driving the boat, and he was obsessively cleaning his fridge on the boat. And while I'm having this mystical type experience, he's obsessively cleaning his fridge. And I remember looking up, I was like, T, that's like the 9th time you've wiped down the ketchup bottle. Like, chill, like, relax, like, just be. And so set and setting is very important. And of course, I didn't know anything about set and setting then.
Well, and that raises an important point, because what I'm hearing when you're describing this journey is not the usual sort of therapeutic or transformational environment within which these experiences usually occur. As those who watch or listen to this show know, for instance, my own initiation into the world of psilocybin was done with a facilitator guide who was very experienced and had ritualistic elements with a very detailed intent setting process in place. And it truly did connect me and lead to a similar sort of transformational metaphysical experience. I'm hearing that in this case with you, you're on a boat and you all decide to do it, and it's almost like it was accidental metaphysical transformation, right? Like almost random, or maybe not, time for your mind, your body, or your consciousness to make this leap.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was 100% not planned. It was September 4th, 2013, Memorial Day or Labor Day, the later. Yeah, we're out on a boat having a good time. And, I had 15 beers that day. And the medicine was going to find its way through. And I did have a big breakthrough, even amid the, and you're making a face right now. I was like, that's what we did in Chicago. You drink 15 beers on a holiday. And you're out, and it's sunny and it's beautiful. You're out on the boat, and geez, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My baseball team is the Brewers, so it's in my DNA.
Matt Simpson, you just called me out on my own show. I don't know. I think I don't even know whether to hate you or to love you, but I think I'm gonna love you. But, well, let me just ask you, right? Like, if you just did them and you had this experience, paint a picture for us exactly what happened. Like, were you on the edge of the boat looking at the water, or did you go into a room and lay down and cover your eyes, or what happened?
Yeah, I was with. I mean, there was probably some introspection. There was probably some quiet time, but it was mostly real talk. And I remember I was reading Eckhart Tolle's "The Brave New Earth," and talking about some. I got really deep and heavy, and thinking about the hundreds of millions of people that have died from war. And it was just bringing up. I went to a really kind of a dark, heavy place, but it felt like, I don't know, this is truth. This is reality. And how come we can't broach this? And I don't know, that they were cool and receptive and open to, and just kind of like, hey, he's high. But that set in motion something really, really special. And from that point forth, that catalyzed a meditative journey where I got really serious about meditation, and things started accelerating in my life very, very quickly.
Okay. We're going to get to that acceleration in a minute, but I just want to 100% make sure I understand. You ingested the psilocybin, you went into an altered state. I'm not hearing that you were really having visions, but that you were engaging in complex, deep, metaphysical level thinking processes, engaging in conversations with others around this. Eventually, you went out. I assume there wasn't any sort of integration that went on. And then you went into this acceleration process afterwards. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, you're hearing me correctly. Maybe add that there was a point in that experience, because it came out of the middle of nowhere where I wasn't planning for this. Yeah. So there was a point where Tony and Mary, they went to bed or went to go do whatever. And there was a point where I could go within and to have that introspective experience and to really, truly feel. And it was the first time that I believe that I've felt since the childhood trauma, since that active cortisol drip and norepinephrine, this heightened vigilance that I'd had, and I've been in that state since childhood. And to feel beyond that was grace. It truly was this incredible piece of, hey, it's going to be okay. It's just going to be okay. And from there, again, things started accelerating. I started investigating, what was this? What was this experience? How come no one's talking about this? And then I, came across the Johns Hopkins studies. I came across, NYU and the end of life anxiety, et cetera. And then I got ultimately very curious about ayahuasca from this.
And so, as you indicated later, after this psilocybin experience and the acceleration of your introspection, you ended up engaging with ayahuasca. Before we get to that, how did you change long term, or how did your change develop after that initial psilocybin revelation?
Yeah, peace is the first word that comes to mind. Just a profound inner peace and presence and calm that I didn't have before. Ability to lean in, and ultimately I've improved upon that over of course, we don't just snap our fingers and have our nervous system fixed, but there was an opportunity to know that there's something bigger than myself, that there's something to work towards, that there's freedom is possible ultimately. And I was in a really stuck, toxic, codependent business relationship at that time. And so this really motivated me to start doing my inner work and start figuring out where I was missing the mark. And again, motivating me to meditate. And the spirit of meditation, or the practice of meditation, and the spirit of psilocybin, I believe are so tightly, together, they're synergistic, I should say. And how the psychedelic medicines are really teaching us that it's not about the psychedelics, but it's about peace. It's about meditation. There's this doorway that's inside of us that we have access to with the power of the breath and our conscious will.
So when you talk about the relationship between psilocybin, meditation, and particularly breathing, and you mentioned that a few minutes ago, could you explain to us a little bit more exactly what that means and honestly what breathing has to do with anything?
Yeah, great question, Scott. Thank you. The word spirit derives from the Greek word spiritus, meaning the breath of life. The word soul translates in Old English to vital breath. And when we really slow down, we take a few breaths to get into the present moment and to think about that. That's pretty powerful. We all want to have more spirit and connect to spirit, and we all want to have more soul. Mm-hmm. And when we are connected to our breath, we're connected to the present moment. And that's where the magic happens. Not in our past, not in the stories, not in the ruminations, not in the traumas, not in the memories, but in the present moment, not in the future, not in our anxious thoughts, not in these stories that only exist in our mind, these anxious stories about a future that truly doesn't exist, but in our mind. And when we quiet our mind with the breath, we can connect to the present moment. And again, that's where all the magic is.
Did people in your life notice a difference?
Yes. They didn't understand my journey, but I was happy and smiley, and my health has improved dramatically. I was 240 pounds with man boobs and a low libido and affect and just low energy, and I'm 195 pounds, my high school weight, and smashing my fitness goals right now, and loving life. And yeah, people haven't understood my shift and transformation, but I'm happy. I'm doing the work that I'm here to do, and I knew that was going to be the case with many of my relationships. When embarking on this path, that there'd be a long stretch where people wouldn't understand what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. I've experienced that too, and I think a lot of psychonauts have. You ended up then engaging with ayahuasca. Talk to us a little bit about why ayahuasca either called you or you felt called to it.
Yeah, it most certainly called me. It was my 35th birthday, October 16th, 2014. I just sold a business that I had been working on for the last 7 years. And in that moment, I'm supposed to be out hooting and hollering with the new brass, this national company, and all the money that we just inked in this deal, and the responsibility and career path trajectory, et cetera. And all I could think about was this path of service that I'm on right now. And 2 months later, I was down in the jungles of Costa Rica having a profound healing with ayahuasca, a visionary experience that showed me a path forward. And I could envision a way out of this personal hell that I'd created. And, I planned for 6 months, but it ended up being 11 months it took to untangle myself from the mess that I created in corporate America. And then I walked away from my career December 9th, 2015, and haven't looked back.
Tell us, what is the difference from an experiential perspective between an ayahuasca journey and a psilocybin journey, at least as applies to your own experience?
Yeah, the psilocybin I had done to that point was done recreationally. It was done out on the boat, out in nature. It was done recreationally, going to concerts, foster the people. Geez, a few grams of mushrooms and going to, these rock stars that are, and when you actually listen to their words, they're holy men that are playing rock and roll music. When you really, really listen. And I remember going the first time I went to the Foster the People concert, and I was thinking, these people are nuts here. And then I was like, 6 months later, I'm like, I'm one of the crazies.
Your eyes were open, right?
Yes, they're groovy. It's an awesome beat and powerful music, inspirational, etc. And ayahuasca is very different from that. It's you're doing this journey. It's a group ritual, community ritual, 20, I'd say 10 to 20, sometimes 30 people in this experience. There's a safe space for you to really go deep. Everybody's got their yoga mat, or they've got their little bed to sleep on. You're in a temple, and there's just a lot of space for people to go within. The agreements on the front end, everybody's there for healing. They're there for letting go. So there's no pretense, there's no BS. Everybody's going through something, and that's powerful. We're doing this in community. And, having the safe space to go within, the medicine's extraordinarily powerful. Like a laser guided missile, it will go right to your trauma. That thing that we hide in the day to day, that we try to hide from, yes. It will go right there. And for 4 to 6 hours, it might even rub it in your face, kind of as a exposure therapy to really do some healing.
How did you change then even further? Because I'm assuming that you did change after that ayahuasca experience.
Yeah, the ayahuasca experience was so profound because, again, I was in a safe space where I could gather the data. I could gather the data points, and I could craft a plan on how to untangle myself from the mess that I'd created in Chicago. And it was very clear instructions of the fact that I had to meditate and wake up an hour and 30 minutes before sunrise every school day of the year 2015 to get my freedom. I had to move my body and to do a yoga practice. I had to journal. I had to take time to deepen into my spiritual practices of meditation. And I had to find mentors and other people that could help me on the journey. And all of that was very clear in one evening, the second ceremony. My inner shit talker that had been unruly my whole life went completely silent for the whole night, just peace. And it allowed me to envision the path ahead. It allowed me to see where I'm missing the mark, where I'm sabotaging my dreams, where I'm leaking energy. It allowed me to see the toxic relationships in my life and how I was participating in my own demise.
It almost sounds like you, and I can't even believe I'm saying this on the Webdelics podcast, yet these words are about to come out of my mouth. It almost sounds like in a spiritually transformative experience, you developed a work plan for your life.
Scott, you're spot on. Absolutely, 100%. A 5-year business plan flashed. It wasn't a flash. It was a whole night of having, again, my inner shit talker offline. And it was a way to envision the path ahead, not in like a Nostradamus fortune-telling manner, but in a probabilistic manner. If I do this, and that, that'll likely happen. These doors will likely open. These might close. But it was enough for me to see that there's hope. And that I could find my freedom ultimately. And that's what I was working for at that time.
Well, that's interesting because although it was not fortune-telling in its nature, as you said, it was probabilistic, if I pronounced that right. I'm curious, did the probabilities that you anticipate or did the steps that were laid out to you unfold in a way that made it feel fortune-telleristic, or right, like when you followed the steps that it gave you, were the outcomes basically as the ayahuasca business plan seemed to predict? Did they actually happen, or was it just some sort of random plan and then later you're like, well, okay, that's another plan that's just going to go in the shelf?
No, it was pretty close. It was pretty close. I was embarking on a journey of traveling around the world with only a backpack, and that tightened up my focus. I realized I needed, in order to do that safely, especially doing a lot of these psychedelic medicines outside of the pale, so to speak, that I needed to be grounded. I needed to be rooted in these practices. And yeah, everything unfolded in a probabilistic manner. Some things didn't happen as planned. Some things took longer. And, this comes to mind, that just this idea that with altered states, time is distorted. So we don't always know how fast something will take. And sometimes, and a learning goal, something that we're doing new for the first time, always takes us longer.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Well, so you have described yourself as a microdosing coach. Matt, I haven't heard anything about microdosing. What are you talking about?
Yes, there's a massive cultural phenomenon going right now in our culture, Scott, and people are coming to this medicine as we approach MDMA assisted psychotherapy being a very likely approved FDA cure, possibly by what we're going to know by August of 2024. And this is a modality, a method that people can come to the path in maybe a more conservative manner. Maybe the high dose isn't for everybody in 2024 when we're in these precarious times, and an opportunity for people to safely come to this path. And I always affectionately say, maybe we should learn how to drink out of a straw before a fire hose of inspiration. and that the microdosing can be utilized to root in. We can use that boosted neuroplasticity that we get from the microdosing and the macrodosing to root into our meditation practice, our contemplative journaling, our conscious breath work, moving our body, getting out in nature, etc. And to start utilizing the microdosing to create the structure and the routines in our life so we can source that joy and inspiration and connection from within.
What made you decide to focus on microdosing as opposed to macrodosing, though? Because that's what transformed you, after all.
Yeah, it was in my book, Worth the Fight, I wrote primarily about the high dose experience, the high dose psilocybin and high dose ayahuasca. And I saw a big shift 2 to 3 years ago, a big shift in the market. I'm an empowerment coach. I launched my empowerment coaching business with my book on Valentine's Day 2019. And a few years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, I saw a big shift in the market. Everybody was coming to me for microdosing support. So I thought, you know what, Matt, you should get really good at understanding the nuances of this practice and to really start studying this so you can hold space for your clients and help them get the most out of this unconventional strategy for health, well-being, boosted mood, energy levels, and creativity.
If I am trying to decide whether microdosing or macrodosing, particularly of a substance like psilocybin, is right for me, and I come to you and say, okay, what should I do? What's your response?
I would get clear as to why someone is embarking on this journey. What are they seeking to co-create with a sacred medicine? Are they in a position where they could have a guide or a trip sitter and to do a high dose? Are they looking to heal trauma? I would give 2 thumbs up for somebody if they're earnest about going within and healing trauma, or doing this in a supported manner with a guide. Again, 2 thumbs up if they can have that scenario. But not everyone has the luxury of doing that, or flying out of the country to go to Jamaica for some of these retreats, or going to Oregon for a legal psilocybin retreat, the thousands of dollars that it costs, that someone might be more apt to start with the microdosing. And it's going to be dependent on the person's situation, their intention, and ultimately their finances, of course, are going to play a big role in this as well.
I love Instagram. I'm on it. Webdelics is on it. So many of our guests are on it. And there are all sorts of fun people who DM me every day saying that they are microdosing coaches or they can get me some great mushrooms. How do I know if I'm seeking microdosing that the person I'm talking to is a legit coach like you, as opposed to someone who's probably scamming if they're reaching out to me cold through Instagram?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. That's a big pain point, and I've seen that a half dozen times in my psychedelics and limitless personal growth meetups that I host, that are Chicago-based, Boston-based, and Miami-based, where people are reaching out saying, "Hey, I just got ripped off," and there's not recourse. for it. We're going to call the cops and say, "Hey, I was trying to get some psilocybin, and they did not deliver on my $300."
Right. Yeah, kind of an embarrassing question to ask, right? And so, what would you tell people? How do you know if anyone is any good? How do you know who to trust?
Yeah, that's a tough one. We're in a time of prohibition, so I would encourage someone to, if the microdose mentor or microdose coach has climbed the mountain that's in front of them, and you've had an opportunity to connect with them, and it feels like a good fit, go for it. But trust your intuition. That's really what this work is all about, is reconnecting to our intuition. And but there are a lot. I've seen it. I've been microdose coaching for the last 3 years now, and I'm seeing the market is flooded with people that might have had an experience, and now they feel as though they can safely hold space for others, and that ultimately is going to create a lot of problems.
Speaking of potential problems, Matt, I have to ask you this. When you talk about having this transformative psilocybin experience on a boat, are you endorsing that for folks who might be listening to or watching this episode, or are there things that you might have learned from that experience, right? Like, please just clean your refrigerator once, that people might want to consider if they are thinking about either doing a macrodose, or they're on a boat or at a party or something like that, and someone says, let's do some psilocybin?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for clarifying this. I would not encourage someone to do that unless they felt safe, and the set and setting was properly outlaid, and there was intention involved. Yeah, out in the middle of Lake Michigan, that's a wonderful place to have that experience, but the intention is going to be so important. And yeah, things could have gone awry. Maybe they did go awry, and that ultimately led me to doing this incredible healing and living my dream life. But this, in terms of the recreational setting, people are going to do this, and they're going to do these out at parties, and they're going to do them at concerts. And so being real about that, and that if you're going to do this, to try to bring intentionality in that. I'm not going to judge anybody. Most people are coming to this path after a Foster the People concert, or after a name your rock star, whoever it is, that has a big arena full of people, and psychedelics are so very much entrenched in our society, immersed in our society, I should say, and people are doing and having these experiences.
By the way, I am all about Foster the People. I love them. So if you're going to give me a new context for them every time I'm listening to them, let me ask you one final question. The original theme of this episode, before we went down all these incredible rabbit holes that I'm glad we went down, was how to turn trauma into your superpower. How did you do that, Matt? And how can I?
Thank you, Scott. And it's been such a blessing to have this time with you on the Webdelics podcast. What comes to mind for me is Dr. Gabor Mate's directive. He's inviting us to believe that we can liberate the energy of trauma into the energy of life. And I think that's what we're doing here with psychedelic medicines. That's what we're doing here with microdosing and the practices. We're leaning into our trauma, the adversity, the pain. I'm a big believer in a central part of the Worth the Fight mission and message of hope and healing is the very same degree to which we lean into our darkness, the pain, the adversity, the trauma, is the very same degree to which we can stand and share and love in our light. So if we want to go for our dreams, we've got to go to that place. We've got to liberate that energy, and to know that there's the tools are very much a part of in our culture right now. These psychedelic medicines, meditation, mindfulness, powerful breath work, breathing patterns of the Wim Hof method and Dr. Huberman's NSDR, moving our bodies, getting out in nature, all of it.
You mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation that a lot of the social issues, the social challenges that we're having as of the date of this recording, which is in the spring of 2024, we're in a period, for those who might be listening to or watching this many years from now, in which there is a extraordinary social division. People seem to hate each other everywhere you go. There's upsurges of social unrest, disruption going on left and right. It's a very challenging cultural moment to experience. It's a very challenging political moment to experience, a very challenging social moment to experience. And yet, if you're saying that trauma can be our superpower and you're tying trauma into these destructive behaviors, which really thinking about it, it's hard to argue that that's not behind how we behave and collectively, then, right, what is a society but just a group of individuals, that if these substances were more freely available, irrespective of what that might look like and to what extent there might be regulatory or other sort of restrictions on them to limit their access or to keep people safe, we could begin to help our larger social traumas, because individually we'd each be leaning into them. Am I understanding the implications of what you're saying correctly?
Yes, 100%, Scott. And I want to invite the audience to, we haven't talked about the veteran collective soul healing mission, the Worth the Fight mission of raising funds for our veterans to have them heal, to push this edge. A big part of my path and in my book, Worth the Fight, sharing this veteran collective soul healing mission. And in these times of grave discord and polarization, this is one of the few things, psychedelic healing, veteran healing, that both the left and the right both agree on. And this is smack dab in the middle, and it humbles our ego and allows people to have collaborative conversations. It allows people to tap into the shared humanity. And our veterans are dropping like flies to suicide. Last count, 24 per day. That's likely closer to 40. If they can heal and get right after going to war, then that's going to send a big signal to all of us. Because 2024, everybody's struggling with something, so they can promote community resilience. And yeah, being in Denver for the Psychedelic Science 2023 conference, and to see Governor Rick Perry, this very conservative, dapper, former governor of Texas, again, very conservative, and Governor Paulus of Colorado, a gay man, and everybody's, coming together in the spirit of brotherly love, and Rick Doblin's very liberal, very, very progressive in his thought process, but they're coming together over what's shared. They're coming to go together over a potential solution, and they're putting they're putting to the side all of their squawking and all of the ego, and again, focusing on what is shared and building from there. It was a beautiful thing to see how this could be a unifying point for our fractured nation and fractured global human family. Healing the hearts and minds of our veterans that know honor, integrity, courage. They're all leadership trained. They just need medicines that work.
And that perhaps is my one takeaway from this conversation, something I truly never anticipated thinking about or framing the psychedelic renaissance around. A way independent of the psychedelics themselves for people to come together who might not ever otherwise stand in the same room. I could imagine a day in which a conservative leader and a progressive leader who might have been pointing fingers at each other and hurling all sorts of abuse in each other's direction, maybe even giving each other a hug because they came together and brought something out into the world, a process or the legalization of something or more availability of something that could heal people, that's indisputably, irrespective of culture wars, something worth doing. Thank you for that insight. If there's one takeaway that you would like to share that you haven't been able to so far, that you want to underscore from earlier, what might that be, Matt?
Thank you, Scott, and I appreciate your you having me on the podcast, and great to hear that point resonates. That we're doing this work on the micro level, but also on the macro level. I just love to invite your audience to check out my work, worththefightbook.org. I am a microdose mentor, and I do have 10-week magic and microdosing mentorship programs. So I do invite your audience to reach out to me for a free 30-minute fostering flow empowerment session where we can shine light on the wondrous possibility on the path ahead and maybe some obstacles and challenges that someone might be struggling with. And in the spirit of Dr. King, this is civil disobedience. I do provide the medicine to earnest intentions, people that are prepared to do this brave inner work and embark on the brave journey through the heart.
Keep your eyes on the prize, my brother.
Thank you.
For those of you who have been listening and watching, stay tuned. We're going to have coming up series of episodes discussing other substances that have piqued the public's interest, as well as some that aren't as well known. Ketamine, San Pedro, others are all going to be explored in depth with stories as well as facts that will really help you understand their role and their possibilities. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to tell everyone that you know about what we're doing. We want to get the word out and make sure that a lot of people are helped along the way. One thing that you can additionally do, and we'd love you a little more for, is if you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite audio platform or on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple or any other audio platform, and then leave a comment on the YouTube page for this particular episode if you enjoyed it. That could only help push what we're doing out even more and help additional folks along the way. And then make sure to follow Webdelics on all of our social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. After you do that, go to our website at webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. And sign up to our newsletter for accurate, up-to-date, and scientifically curated articles and other information about psychedelics and plant medicine. And then finally, make sure that you come back again for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.